Hello and welcome to Insight. I'm Natasha Jhabhaskar. The Union Public Service Commission last week declared results of the prestigious Civil Services Examination. This year's topper, Nandini KR, is an officer of the Indian Revenue Service. Anmol Sher Singh Bedi is the topper among male candidates, securing overall second rank. The Civil Services exam has among the lowest success rates among competitive examinations. The overall success rate has always been less than 5 people per 1,000 applicants. Clearly so, it took Nandini KR, this year's Indian Administrative Services exam topper, 4 attempts to get to the first position. Reports suggest that nearly 7 out of every 10 candidates require at least 3 attempts before succeeding in the Civil Services entrance examination. Abysmal success rates, years of preparation and multiple attempts by candidates past their mid-20s studying subjects other than what they have been trained in, and the ability to get into some of the country's best educational institutions are some of the key attributes of the IAS entrance process. So what really makes civil services such a coveted career choice? We ask our panelists today.
The Civil Services Examination is a nationwide competitive examination conducted by the UPSC, the Union Public Service Commission, for recruitment to various civil services of the Government of India, including the Indian Administrative Service, Indian Foreign Service, Indian Police Service, among others. It is conducted in 2 phases. A preliminary examination consisting of 2 objective type papers, general studies and aptitude test, and a main examination consisting of 9 papers of conventional essay type, followed by a personality test. The Civil Service Examination is not only considered as one of the most admired posts in India, but is also considered as one of the toughest exams in the world. The success rate in this examination is one of the lowest in the world, which is 0.1% to 0.3%. It offers a very diverse career. One would begin at the grassroots level and then move up the career ladder, donning different roles at different times. The role of a civil servant is to uplift the society and act as the direct representative of the government.
Right, so joining us on the program today, very esteemed guest, Director of Sri Ram's IAS New Delhi, Sri Rangam. Thanks very much, sir, for joining us in this program. Also joining me on the program today is rank holder of Civil Services Examination 2016, IPS Probationer, Sumit Jha. Thanks very much, Sumit, for joining us in this program, who is also alumnus of Sri Ram IAS, and Dr. Sushma Yadav, Professor, Indian Institute of Public Administration, also former Pro Vice Chancellor, IGNOU, member UGC. Thanks very much, ma'am, for joining us in this program. Questions we are asking today in our program: why a career in civil services in the first place? What makes a good civil servant? How to make civil services more efficient? Do we need urgent reforms in our bureaucracy? What is the current state of governance in our country? Right, getting straight into the discussion. I'll start with you before I actually come to Sumit on why civil services in the first place. But the fact, Mr. Rangam, that every year we see enormous number of students wanting to clear this competitive examination. Why everyone has such tremendous interest in the first place to be a civil servant?
See, as you said in your introduction, prestige, merit, power, and the self-esteem, instant recognition being a part of the policy implementation process, and after some time being a part of the policy making apparatus. I think this is a heady kind of a cocktail that no meritorious person can resist. You know, you have lots of careers. Some people want to be teachers, some want to be journalists. For such people, you know, they are all dream jobs. But some people associate their destiny with government. For them, IAS and nothing else.
Right.
That's what
now, the fact that you've been in this, in coaching, teaching students and being part of the coaching culture for quite a long time. If I have to ask you to draw a comparison, sort of students who are entering services today and the sort of students who are entering in last few years, is there a shift?
See, if you are entering into the service this year, I mean, of late, you are dealing with a very difficult country. diversity and there's a churn and so many sections of society are coming up, and law is such a major tool of empowerment. So you are in a cauldron. It requires tremendous skills, not only intellectual, emotional, even spiritual. Earlier the system was relatively stable. People took what you gave them. Now there is a huge social churn. So a civil servant, particularly IAS, IPS, in these times, it's a very, very demanding career, and it's not, you are an MBA. Whatever be the institute from where you have graduated, you are there to make profit.
Right.
But if you are an IAS officer, imagine anywhere in the country, the problems you deal with, according to Harvard School of Business, this is the job which is the most difficult.
Right. So, a range of challenges, you're not just part of the policy formulation, but also of policy implementation, ground realities. And as Mr. Ram just mentioned, that the challenges are tremendous in a country which is as diverse as India. Now, Sumit, you are a rank holder, 111, IPS a probationer. An interesting aspect of you qualifying this exam is that your optional was physics. IIT Roorkee engineer. Why civil services in the first place?
Ma'am, these days, in the recent times, we are seeing a shift from self-centric career towards public service. With the growth of information technology and things like that, we are coming to know about what are the problems that are existing at the grassroots level. So we, the youth of the country, have aspirations that we go beyond our career, beyond looking to our own career and doing something for our society, to our country. So this civil services provides us with that kind of platform in which at a very young age, in your 20s, you are going to get tremendous amount of discretions, tremendous amount of opportunities to implement your ideas, innovative ideas. And this kind of platform does not exist anywhere in the private sector. And in the public sector, if you look out for the jobs, civil services are the most coveted jobs. That's why the youths are so mad after these jobs.
And what it really takes to crack the civil services examination, as I said initially when we, in my introductory remarks, 5 out of 1,000 applicants qualify this competitive examination. So the success rate is between 0.1 to 0.3%. What it takes, the energy, the perseverance, what it takes to crack this examination?
Ma'am, the first and foremost thing would be self-determination. Once you decide that you have to take a plunge into this examination, you cannot take a step back for at least 4 years, 5 years. Because once the cycle of examination is such that once you get inside it, you will think that next year I'm going to make it, next year I'm going to make it. So this kind of thing makes this exam even tougher. And the kind of people who are getting into the aspirants community, students from IITs, IIMs, they are leaving crores of packages and then coming into this examination. This also brings up the level of competition of this examination. So for any average students who has been doing good in their academics, there is no need of being among the meritorious students, 90%, 80% holders. Even an average students, if he or she has determination to crack this examination, can do it very easily if he or she persevere for at least 2 or 3 years.
Okay, so an average student can also clear this examination. What's your take? Because generally, Mr. Rangam, it is believed that technocrats are clearing this examination at a greater number if one has to compare with students coming from the humanities background now.
See, technocrats in the sense of engineers, but they come here and take social science subjects. They may be engineers, doctors, anything else. But once here, you take history, political science, public administration, anthropology. So to say that engineers are making the natural sciences are making is wrong, point number one. And I'll disagree with Sumit because this exam requires brilliance. Average people cannot make it. Because it's multidisciplinary, number one. For example, I'll tell you, today the verdict, I don't know if it's come or it's coming anytime now, Supreme Court verdict on Aadhaar.
Right.
it requires enormous knowledge of the Constitution, Article 21, life, personal liberty, and why Aadhaar. You should be familiar with the entire government literature and also the critical literature for you to be able to make a essay or even 250-word write-up.
Right.
So to say average people in a certain given period of time can come up to expectations is a bit of a oversimplification.
Okay, so you need to be brilliant to crack this examination. Of course, 0.2% to 3.3%. But what is the most surprising aspect, Professor Yadav, is that such brilliant students are entering services. What really happens after that? Because Sumit is a probationary officer. Maybe next year when he comes on a program with us, he'll talk more about discretion. He mentioned a very, very risky word, and that is discretion. What sort of powers you enjoy when you actually become a civil servant? You enter with a lot of aspiration. More than 50% of IAS officers have spent less than a year in their respective tenures. We'll talk about the nature of work also, but what really explains this tremendous interest in civil services?
I think the interest is, as Mr. Sriram said, it is the place where real authority and power lies. It is the place where decision making lies. It is also the place, as the young probationer said, it is the place where you can make change if you want to. It's a place where you can change the destiny of the people whom you really feel attached to. But I think truth somewhere lies in between. The authority and power is there if you go with the system. You become part of the system. You start enjoying the system as others are enjoying.
Right.
But you can change the system if you really want to, but then you have to slog for that. Because I've read about officers and a book, Why I Am Not a Civil Servant, because he says civility is the last thing that we are left with.
Right.
An officer who survives in this system forgets about civility. And if one remembers civility, then I think one becomes a misfit in the system. Because if you write the truth on the files, then it is not accepted.
Right.
You are not given positions. We have interaction with the young officers and the senior officers. And the senior officers tell us how to survive in the system, how to sustain in the system, or you're thrown out by the system, or you're sidelined by the system. But whatever it be, still it remains the most coveted, and I would say it's not merely changing the system, it's not merely changing the lives also. The lives in other services which are worth crores of packages also make your life very tough.
So what it does to the brilliant mind, when Mr. Rangam said that, the sort of students who are actually entering civil services are the bestest, in terms of the performance and the rigor this exam, forces you to get into. It's a year-long process, on an average, after 4 attempts, you actually qualify for this examination. So what happens to the brilliant mind when you don't have those powers which you want to exercise? You're talking about high aspirational class. What happens to that then?
No, you do have powers. I wouldn't say you don't have the powers. Like if there is one Mr. Session, he didn't do anything extraordinary. He only implemented the law and rules which were there already. He didn't create rules. And there may be many more like that, Mr. Khemka's, or there are many other names. Two things happen to this brilliance. One thing is that you try to change the system, you get shifted, transferred, you accept that as part of your job, and you do keep making a significant change wherever you are, or you get completely sidelined. If you are much more brilliant, brilliance doesn't survive in normal circumstances usually. So those brilliant minds learn to survive.
I think you made a very pertinent point. You're saying surviving the system.
Yes.
So what really makes a good civil servant? This is the issue which we'll raise on the other side of this break when I ask my panelists what really makes a good civil servant. Can you really explore and exhibit these qualities which you have in you as a brilliant student, as a brilliant person who has qualified this examination? Does the service really give you that opportunity? We'll talk about that also on the other side of this break. Stay tuned. Right, welcome back. You're watching Insight. A civil services survey recently had revealed that 1 out of 3 among top officers in India's civil services has at some point considered his or her job, quitting his or her job. Political interference, harassment, frustration at being unable to contribute was among the reasons that almost drove them to leave. So how do we really demarcate clearly the boundary that exists between legitimate intervention and undue interference? Coming back to you, Mr. Rangam, on this, when we talk about legitimate intervention and interference and undue intervention, the challenge is that what really makes a good civil servant? You mentioned brilliant minds entering civil services. What sort of discretion they enjoy, and how do you really communicate this to your students who come for coaching?
Since the last few years, the syllabus of the examination at the main level is changed. There is a separate full-fledged paper introduced to render the aspirants sensitive on ethical lines. It has topics like conscience, morality, ethics, values, and that has done tremendous service to the aspirant in opening him up to the human side of the career he is seeking. So when he is in the civil service, even after getting so much of power, he is not blind to the human sensitivities, which is a great contribution. You see, why I like this examination is, even while preparing, it makes the aspirant emotionally mature because the roller coaster ride that it is. And once he is in the service, he is able to relate to people. Right. Go back a few decades. You are allowed to write in your vernaculars, be it Bodo, be it Telugu. Third ranker is someone who wrote in Telugu, gave his interview in Telugu. You know, this sort of what I would call proletarianization of civil services that makes them go right into the middle of people, relate to their brothers and sisters and be of help to them. Therefore, the heart and its precedence over the mind is the focus of the civil service exam reform in the last few years, I would say decades. And given the fact that we have so much of inequality, poverty, gender disparity and plain exploitation and so on, we require such orientation. I should admire the UPSC for fitting the syllabi for the purposes of the civil service in the country today.
Okay, and seeing the current trends, will you also accept that UPSC is a great leveler? You know, we have seen students coming from different streams, different backgrounds, actually qualifying and getting top ranks.
People from great technological and other global universities are leveled out. And people, first generation people from downtrodden sections of society are coming to beat them hands down. How does it happen? Because this is one institution that regards merit in an unalloyed manner, not only merit in the IQ mode, but also a welfare orientation. The entire interview, apart from your IQ, it tests your emotional quotient. That is why we can boast of some of the most original people, sensitive people among the youngsters in the bureaucracy today. Right. That is what I marvel at.
So original and sensitive people in the bureaucracy today, what the system does to them, what really makes a good civil servant?
I think the system tones them down. The first posting, when they have the attachment that they'll have during the probation itself or during the training itself, brings them down from those ideals and the dreams that they have or the aspirations they have about the system. And it brings them down to what really administration is, where you have norms on both sides, where you have pressures on all sides, the pressures from above, the pressures from below, the pressures from within, and the seniors telling them, come down, cool down, understand, ye nahi chalega, you don't work like this, you are part of a big machinery and you are a simple cog in the machinery. All that, you know, brings them down to reality. Why I'm saying so is, you know, I have talked to very, very highly aspirant achievers who have joined the service, and then once they're returning from 6 months of ground posting or the first attachment, they are changed completely, and they say, no, all this was theory, and what we see there, it's completely different. They
But isn't
come.
this true for all professions today? Because the first thing when you enter job market, the first thing you are told is that forget everything you have learned in, or the ideals or the aspirations you have. Our task is to untrain you to make you suitable for this particular work.
It doesn't happen to all. In professions, it doesn't happen. In teaching, it doesn't happen. I'm sure if you are not bad, even in a medical profession or a legal profession, it doesn't happen, because there your knowledge goes with you, and it rather helps you and strengthens you. But here it is a bit different. So how do this? So because they're told to survive. So, and why I'm saying it, because this is the first question we ask. If we train them, they say train our politicians as well, because we have to work with them. But the seniors among them, retired cabinet secretary, retired home secretary, and then one tells them that no, there is a middle way also. And a bureaucrat must understand that he cannot or she cannot walk the extreme paths.
Right.
One has to understand what people need. One also has to understand that you are not really the policy maker, you are only the executive branch. You have to implement what policies have been made for you and do that within the constitutional limits. But the sensitivity of the officer comes when one really tries to achieve what the policy wants him to achieve or her to achieve, and one really wants to deliver what they are supposed to deliver. So there the test lies. And the senior officers have been sharing with us that the politicians also know if you are somewhere ready to succumb, they'll make you succumb. But if they know that you are going to do your work and going to listen to them if it is right and not doing if it is wrong, I think after a few years they start respecting you for that.
So are we also in a very implicit way saying that there is no place for opinion in the system? Sort of students who are actually qualifying, how far they can go, because all this while you have said surviving the system.
No,
why would you, who you are trying to survive? Why you're trying to survive the system? Why you just can't flow with the system in the same sort of opportunities and challenges that it poses to you? Why you have to survive a particular system?
No, you can flow with the system very well, but you can't really change the system completely as soon as you enter. You can change your domains, and you surely can bring a change. A good officer always brings a change wherever one works. So that is possible very much. I'll give you one example. A chief secretary of a state is trying to work within the limits of the law. A minister comes, a politician comes and says, you're breaking, you're putting so many brakes, you are just not letting us work. He said, you understand if there are no brake in the vehicle, what happens? He said, no, nothing happens, we can work. And he says, after 3 months, the same minister comes because he's been asked to resign.
Right.
Because the way one goes is not as the law prescribes. And one can laugh it away, one can wish it away, or one can show the mirror also that this is where we count and this is how we count.
Okay.
Yes.
So, Sumit, are you ready for these challenges? Because, Professor Yadav, she just pointed out many of the challenges when you become part of the system. And as an IPS probationer, if you're posted in Sukma or many of these crucial districts where you're fighting Naxal challenge, how do you, seem to tackle these challenges and trying to create that sort of an understanding also with the political establishment, because that goes hand in hand as a bureaucrat?
Ma'am, I would divide this into 3 parts. One is the syllabus of this examination. In a toned down version, we have already studied some part of the syllabus in our up to class 10th or 12th level. But then with this kind of maturity after graduation, when we study this syllabus, when we are taught this in our coachings, we come to know, we can appreciate what is written into our constitution, what problems women are suffering, what are the internal security problems, like you said, in Naxal affected areas with child, old, elderly persons. Now we are in a position to appreciate these problems, and when we are in a position to appreciate this, a sense of empathy, compassion, honesty, integrity and sensitivity towards the problems of the society comes in naturally to us. After this, when we move to the training part, the training is so rigorous. The things like Bharat Darshan, where we are shown what kind of culture we have, what kind of society, what are the problems of society that are persisting on the ground level.
Right.
These things makes us more prepared to tackle these challenges when we enter into the services. Now, coming on the political interference part, these days, ma'am, we are in politics, we are moving from populistic politics towards developmental politics. Now even the society, the electorates are more aware. With the advent of social media, information technology, the moment a politician, or for that matter a bureaucrat, does something wrong in the morning, it gets flashed by night. So you cannot have an advantage of taking a step bad in your own duties.
True.
So these things, and beyond that, Supreme Court and the government itself has come out with many reforms that are in the pipeline. Like Supreme Court has said about creating civil services boards for
Okay,
different
so you're saying
states.
accountability, transparency, and pressure tactics. Because of the advent of new media, it has actually helped officers also to perform. Mr. Rangam, before I take a short break, we also want to know about sort of coaching demands that exist today. When we talk about civil services and the competition that exists, what sort of coaching demands? Because there are also repeated allegations at times that coachings today are actually opening as shops and not much to deliver. How do you really demarcate between the demand that exists and delivering good education?
See, coaching is basically optimizing time and resources. If you land in the right place, you are told what to do and more importantly what not to do, and syllabus is broken down, it is handled, simplified, all said and done. However brilliant you may be, your time is short, it's your enemy. And what to study? You want to study so much, and so much need not be studied. So with the experience, the faculty simplifies it for you, cuts the learning curve short, and you don't have to make mistakes to learn. Others' mistakes are your guide. And so practically speaking, it enables you to succeed. Beyond that, coaching does not do anything. It helps you succeed. And the ethical side and so on and so forth that you are taught, after all, conscience is internal to everyone.
Okay.
And ethical sensitivity also, we are a spiritual country. We read Ramayana, Mahabharata and so on and so forth, Bible. From there, all of us are taught by our parents and primary school teachers so much about the human side of life. So coaching center can help you succeed.
Right.
Yes, that is a contribution.
Many of our viewers are UPSC aspirants, and the first question they generally ask is that what optional should I take for this examination? Now, is there a shift in the choice of optionals also now? They generally believe that public administration is comparatively a scoring paper instead of psychology or sociology. So how do you really look at the choices which are available today?
Sumit has taken physics. He is All India #2. 315 marks in physics is not 1 mark less under any circumstances. Whereas if you have the same mark in a social science subject, next year repeatability is not guaranteed, because it's not a 2 plus 2 kind of a reflection on your merit. Therefore, social sciences are a little volatile, but still in social science without having to spend so much of time, be it political science, anthropology and so on, you have good teachers, you have material, you have so much floating around in the televisions, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, TV and BBC and so on. Your chances are far brighter if you take social science. And physics, chemistry, they are not everybody's cup of tea. You may be from MIT, you may be from IIT. This is reserved for very, very nanoscopic few people.
Okay, and what about literature? Because we've also seen this year's topper, her optional was Kannada literature, Telugu literature. What's with the literatures? Are literatures now really picking up pace?
Literature is good. A lot of people are not conversant. They have a natural flair for their own language and literature. There are teachers, the criteria that clinch your choice are: is there a good teacher? Are there good books? Are there good study materials? And do you have interest? But interest is negotiable. The first two are the determinants: teacher and material. Yes, and Telugu, there are good teachers, good material. Kannada, Hindi.
I'm very glad that I have a very interesting panel today. For someone who prepares students to qualify for this examination, and for someone who deals with these students who have qualified for this examination, getting them ready for the services, and of course, a young person who has qualified for this examination. It's now time for me to take a short break. In our final segment, we'll talk about the overall civil services structure in our country, how would our panel really rate the present state of governance in our country, and what really needs to change in Indian civil services that it is made more more efficient. Let's not forget, Prime Minister Modi in his oath-taking ceremony clearly stated that he's focusing on maximum governance and minimum government. Has it really happened in the last few years? What has changed in the attitude of political establishment as far as the civil services is concerned? We'll talk about that also in our final segment. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You are watching Inside. The need for major reforms in our system of governance and public administration has assumed greater urgency. How panelists on the show really rate the present state of governance and what really needs to be done to achieve greater accountability in the civil services. Is government really serious about reforms, or are real reforms still a distant dream? Coming back to you, Professor Yadav, accountability, because everything revolves around accountability and transparency in the system. How far do you feel that civil services today, they should be more accountable and they can be made more accountable? What needs to change in the system?
Surely they can be made more accountable, and transparency goes hand in hand. As soon as you become transparent, accountability follows. You remain less accountable, I won't say unaccountable, till you know nobody knows what you're doing. As soon as you know that people are watching you and you can in fact be watched and you're out, till now we were looking at the outputs. So output is not tangible as much. Now that's why we've come to the outcomes. And I give you one example. Like there is a director of social welfare. I'd worked in the social sector much more. And he finds there is a grant coming from the center. He's in a state. And the grant coming from center asks them to make a hostel for the girl students. He starts that project, gets transferred, comes back after 5 years, and then tries to look for that hostel. And he finds the audit has been done, audited accounts have been sent, money has been spent.
Right.
The hostel is not to be seen. He searches, probes, and he finds some guest house has been made. I mean, some building has been made which is being used as a guest house. Now somebody has to be accountable. We look at so many unauthorized buildings all around us. Somebody must have approved them. Somebody must have, okayed them. The real accountability would come when a person who is really responsible for that maybe gets penalized or maybe becomes accountable. And accountability involves either, being penalized or being answerable for.
Right.
The bureaucrats may not completely agree with me, but I think somewhere it has to come. Because as soon as you do it, they'll be more watchful. Because what good officers, and I would say to trainings, we have good officers coming and very good officers who are doing wonderful jobs in their own small domains, say that once you are made accountable, reforms are also part of that, because accountability, transparency remains very important, part of all reforms, but in that a duration which they need to work on a certain project is also really important.
Okay.
So if you know what you're going to do and what is the outcome that you're going to show, which will be open for all to see, I think you'll be able to work, because those who want to put you down will also remain, cautious, because you are showing the papers. And let me tell you, if an officer writes on the file what is right for it, which is the real work of an officer, because when Max Weber says you have to have anonymity, but you also respect hierarchy, then you know who is directly accountable to the people is the politician.
There has been several suggestions, yes.
Number of them, and there have been several reform commissions also.
True.
Starting from 1950, I think 7 onwards, there were smaller committees, then you have the bigger commissions and the ARC1 and the ARC2. But what ARC2 has said, I think we've just started working on it. We've not done it. And usually it is said you reform or you perish.
Right.
But I think we are not perishing, of course, and I don't believe that. But reforms must come, and reforms must come from both sides.
Now, interestingly, be it ARC1 or be it ARC2, all these recommendations made, why it is so difficult to implement these recommendations remains a challenge. They talked about professionalization with stability of tenure. Supreme Court said minimum 2 years of tenure, and citizen-centric administration, accountability, outcome orientation, promoting public service values and ethics. Still, Indian bureaucracy, Indian civil services is rated one of the worst in Asia. What really explains that, Mr. Rangam?
Large country, huge population, serious problems. But apart from that, we should consider some reforms that have taken place as revolutionary. Social audit, Aadhaar, decentralization. And I want to talk about two reforms being contemplated right now. One already being introduced, another being seriously contemplated. 360-degree review of the performance of the civil servant. So far, the annual confidential report is by the superior. Now, under the new government, it is roping in two more sections. One, the subordinates, another, clientele of the civil servant. And that makes sure that what the civil servant receives for his performance is fully reflective of what he did. Point number one. Point number two, lateral entry can also be considered. More people from armed forces can be given certain slice of the whole pie. And in the foreign service also, you can have some of the people from the think tanks.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because I remember there was also limited competitive examination, LCE, where there was a proposal made by the former government to include people from the armed services. In fact, the case is still pending. So how open is the services itself with the idea of having people from the armed forces in police cadre?
You see, one is they fight the external enemy, so how suitable are they to deal with the challenges inside in a democratic context? But that can always be dealt with by retraining them, reskilling them. They are known for their service to the country, so if they are inducted, that will bring about a certain work culture difference, which is right for the country today. So that reform also is being studied. It's made by some people. Prakash Singh case, T.S.R. Subramaniam case, they are all very, very important, because civil servants, we are blaming them for being influenced by the political leaders in a narrow manner, but we should consider the ecosystem.
Right.
So TSR Subramaniam committee says civil services board and 2 years in the field position and so on. That makes them give their best to the country.
Okay.
If they are being pushed around and if you expect them to deliver in the best manner, then it's unrealistic.
Right. So you also have to acknowledge the sort of ecosystem you'll be working in, how to insulate civil servants from undue political interference. Now, Sumit, as an IPS officer, what is it that you really want to do? What is your idea, in terms of what you want to achieve? What sort of work culture you're really looking forward to?
The first and foremost duty of an IPS officer is to maintain law and order. So my domain would be to maintain law and order. Apart from that, there are humongous internal security problems in our country with the rise of cyber crimes, with the rise of drug trafficking, human trafficking. These things have brought in more challenges for the Indian police service officers. So these are the major things that I would be taking care of. Apart from that, public service in general would be the motto of my service.
And before going in the break, I asked you one question: are you writing civil services again next year? And you said yes, I want to qualify for IAS. Why IAS? Why not what you want to do? You can do that as an IPS officer. So what is this big difference between serving as an IPS officer and serving as an IAS officer?
I mean, the domain that an IAS officer gets, apart from the law and order, also comes under the district magistrates itself. And apart from that, the diversity of fields in which an IAS officer can foray into. He or she can be appointed as an ambassador to the United Nations, to the WTO. So these kind of diversities give us a kind of attraction to graduate from IPS to IAS.
Okay, these kind of attractions. Okay, last 5 minutes on the program. Final word, Professor Yadav. If I have to ask you to assess the present state of governance in our country and how to really make the system more efficient, what are these things which we really need to change so that from governance deficit we move to a good governance model?
I think the mindset needs to be changed. Because the mindset is sab chalta hai and we can really survive, as I said. So that mindset needs to be changed, that now you cannot survive, although this government is tightening its grip also and control also, but it's years and years. And the fact that they think law and order is the most important, of course for police it is, but for the whole administration, it's not law and order but human development which is most important, and development of the nation as it is. So as soon as they start understanding that we are really the public servants, if the Prime Minister says, I am the public servant or the people's servant, then the administration is to aid the ministers, and it becomes the public servant much more. So instead of becoming the bosses, the bada sahabs, which was there when the colonial administration was there, I think if they start thinking we have to take care of these millions of people for whom we have come here, because the administration is being run for them, the governance or the face of governance will change. And as soon as that mindset changes, it goes around and it comes back to you in the same form, then the politicians also, they can't really govern a set of officers who are there to govern the country in a manner which is a responsible manner, accountable manner, transparent manner.
Now, is there still a strong colonial hangover with the civil services? The power obsession still exists?
Very much there, because the good officers always share with us that we only do what we are supposed to do. We are not doing anything extraordinary, but even ordinary is not being done. So the moment you start thinking that it's my money also being spent on me and I must show the results, I think this face will change.
Okay, and as a professor of public policy and administration, what is it that you would like to say to students who have qualified this examination and those who are actually preparing for this? What is it that they need to work on?
I think to both of them. Those who are preparing, I would say understand the system and then go into it. Those who are into the system, I would say please don't leave your dreams. Please don't leave your hopes and aspirations. Remain confident about them and then you will achieve them.
Okay.
And as Mr. Shriram said, the face of bureaucracy is changing over these years, and that changed bureaucracy, I'm sure, will come to the people and serve the people in a better way.
Okay.
And as expected by the constitution.
So face of bureaucracy is changing, rule of law must exist. Final word from you, Sumit. What is it that you are expecting from the system now, as you are part of the system as an Indian police services officer? What is it that you are expecting from the system?
I expect that in the time to come, the political class and the bureaucracy, both of them would rise above their self-interest, would come to the table, negotiate what kind of reforms they want, and then they would find a middle path. And in guiding the light, the Supreme Court, the judiciary would be the torch bearer for us.
Okay.
There has been interventions from the judiciary, and what makes me more optimistic is the way the executive and the legislature has aided the judiciary and also accepted the orders of the Supreme Court. Aiding, like in the legislations, we have come out with the amendments to Lokpal Bill, the Prevention of Corruption Act. So all these things converge towards making our system much better than it is now.
Okay, so rise above political egos and drawing that middle path, maintaining a fine balance between the political between the political class as well as the bureaucracy that exists. Final word from you, Mr. Rangam. What is it that needs to change in the system so that it accepts these brilliant minds with open arms?
See, if I have to make an equation out of it, Prakash Singh verdict plus TSR Subramaniam verdict is equal to a very good, responsive, efficient bureaucracy. Yes.
Right. So TSR and Prakash Singh together and the reforms they have suggested will make a very, very efficient bureaucracy. Anything specific, Mr. Rangam, you want to say to students who are preparing for this examination? What is it that they need to work on?
Work hard, love what you are doing, chase knowledge, be relevant, and there is no looking back.
And there's no looking back. And also, most importantly, ethics and integrity, that should be kept intact when you are part of the services, because that's the first thing which we hear, that if that is being compromised or not.
That's indispensable because it's a part of syllabus.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us in this program for a very enlightening discussion. That's all we have for you in our this edition of Inside. Thanks very much for watching.